She strode into Providence Municipal Court like she owned it, diamonds flashing under fluorescent lights, a smirk playing at her lips. When the officer had pulled over her driver for running a red light and nearly causing a collision, Victoria Hensley hadn't apologized. She'd laughed. She'd threatened the terrified couple in the other car, told the officer he had no idea who he was dealing with. And when informed she'd face Judge Caprio, she'd actually smiled wider. But standing before that bench on this particular Wednesday morning at 11:30, something shifted. The confidence became contempt. The arrogance became insult. And when she crossed the line no one crosses in his courtroom, Judge Caprio didn't shout, didn't lecture, didn't perform. He simply went quiet, then delivered one single line that made the entire gallery gasp and reminded every soul watching that wealth can purchase many things, but never integrity. Will Judge Caprio back down when she flaunts her bank account? Will money bend the rules this time? Will anyone finally tell this woman no? Before we show you the exact moment everything changed, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Hit subscribe and that bell, because what happens next is a masterclass in justice you won't forget. The morning had been routine until the clerk's voice cut through the murmur. Case number 5624, City of Providence versus Miss Victoria Hensley. The shift was immediate. Heads turned. Whispers rose and fell like tide. A tall woman in her mid-40s appeared at the rear door, flanked by a nervous man in a dark suit whose hands trembled at his sides. Victoria Hensley moved through the aisle with the kind of stride that suggested she was doing everyone a favor by showing up. Her handbag probably cost more than most cars in the lot outside. Her diamond bracelet caught the light with every movement, a deliberate glint that said, "Look at what I have." She reached the podium and adjusted her designer jacket, surveying the room like a queen inspecting peasants. Judge Caprio glanced up from the docket, his reading glasses perched on his nose. "Good morning, Miss Hensley. The file indicates this involves a moving violation, a near collision, and some concerning behavior afterward." He looked past her toward the uniformed officer standing near the front row. "Officer Nolan, let's hear your account first." The officer stepped forward, clearing his throat. He was composed, professional, but the tension in his jaw suggested this hadn't been a simple traffic stop. "Yes, Your Honor. On February 18th, at approximately 9:15 in the morning, I observed a black Mercedes sedan run a red light at the intersection of Waterman and Benefit. The vehicle came within inches of striking another car, forcing that driver to swerve sharply into the curb to avoid collision." A low murmur rippled through the gallery. Judge Caprio's eyes sharpened slightly. "Continue." "The driver of the Mercedes was Mr. Harold Grant," Officer Nolan said, gesturing toward the nervous man beside Victoria. "He was fully cooperative when I approached him, apologized immediately, admitted the violation, expressed concern for the other vehicle. He was prepared to accept the citation without complaint." Caprio nodded. "Sounds straightforward so far." "It would have been, Your Honor." Nolan's voice took on a different tone. "But Miss Hensley, who was a passenger in the rear seat, exited the vehicle and intervened." The room went quieter still. Judge Caprio folded his hands. "Go on." "She approached me first," Nolan said, consulting his notes. "Told me, quote, 'My driver doesn't pay tickets. Do you have any idea who I am?' End quote. Then she walked directly to the other vehicle, where a young couple sat visibly shaken, and told them that if they filed any complaint or pursued legal action, she would, quote, 'make sure they regretted it financially,' end quote. The couple appeared frightened. They declined to press charges at the scene and left as quickly as possible. Gasps scattered through the gallery. Victoria's driver stared at the floor, shoulders hunched. Judge Caprio removed his glasses slowly. "Threats were made?" "Yes, Your Honor. Direct intimidation. I documented everything. When I issued the citation to Mr. Grant, Miss Hensley laughed and said, and I'm quoting from my report, 'Tickets are for people who can't afford lawyers.'" The courtroom stirred. Even the stenographer paused mid-keystroke. Caprio's gaze settled on Victoria. Is this account accurate, Miss Hensley? She crossed her arms, lips curving into a cold smile. Depends who you ask, Judge. I may have said a few things. People tend to exaggerate when they see someone with actual success. Jealousy doesn't cost anything after all. Several people in the gallery shifted uncomfortably. Judge Caprio's expression remained neutral. Officer, is there anything else the court should know? Nolan hesitated, then nodded. Yes, Your Honor. This isn't Miss Hensley's first incident. 3 years ago, her vehicle was involved in a collision with a pedestrian, a young boy. The case was dismissed after a private settlement was reached. Records indicate the family received compensation, but the original investigation file mentions allegations of witness interference and pressure tactics. Judge Caprio's face darkened just slightly. Noted. He turned back to Victoria. Miss Hensley, do you understand the seriousness of what's being described? She gave a dismissive wave. Judge, I understand one thing. People love drama. They love making mountains out of molehills, especially when there's money involved. My driver knows how to handle the road. As for that other family, maybe they should have been more careful before pointing fingers. Her driver's shoulders sagged further. Judge Caprio studied her in silence, the kind that always preceded something significant. Finally, he spoke. I think we've heard the officer's report. Now let's hear yours, Miss Hensley. Please explain what happened in your own words. Victoria straightened, tilting her chin upward. Oh, you'll hear it, Judge, but fair warning, I don't play victim. The gallery held its breath. Caprio nodded slowly. Neither do I, Miss Hensley. The tension coiled tighter as Victoria adjusted her pearl earrings and smoothed her jacket. She looked less like someone defending herself and more like someone preparing to educate the ignorant. All right, Miss Hensley, Judge Caprio said evenly. You may proceed. She smiled thinly. Well, Your Honor, it's really quite simple. My driver made a minor mistake, a split-second lapse in judgment, and somehow it's been blown into this absurd spectacle. Minor mistake, Caprio repeated. Running a red light and nearly causing a collision isn't minor. Victoria shrugged, the gesture maddeningly casual. Please, nobody was hurt. And let's be honest, half the drivers in this city are worse. I see it every single day. The gallery murmured. Caprio glanced toward her driver. Mr. Grant, did you run the red light? Harold Grant cleared his throat, voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Your Honor, I did. I was distracted for a moment. It was entirely my fault, not hers. Victoria immediately cut in. He's being too polite, Judge. I told him not to stop so suddenly. The light changed too fast. Anyone could have done the same thing. Caprio frowned slightly. You told him not to stop? She smiled wider. Yes, because I know how these traffic traps work. The city loves red light tickets. Easy revenue, right? I pay more in taxes every year than half this city combined. I practically fund your salary. The reaction was immediate. Gasps, whispers, someone in the back row muttering under their breath. Even the stenographer's hands froze briefly. Caprio blinked slowly, his face a mask. Excuse me? Victoria leaned forward slightly, grin turning sharper. Oh, come on, Judge. Don't act surprised. We both know how this works. Cities survive on fines. People like me keep the lights on. So forgive me if I'm not losing sleep over one little ticket. The words hung poisonous in the air. The gallery's murmuring grew louder. Judge Caprio raised one hand, restoring order without raising his voice. Miss Hensley, this courtroom isn't funded by arrogance. It's funded by accountability. Right now, you're showing precious little of that. She smirked. Accountability. I'm here, aren't I? I could have sent one of my lawyers, but I thought I'd give everyone the pleasure of seeing me in person. An awkward laugh escaped from somewhere in the back row, dying instantly when Judge Caprio's eyes shifted that direction. He looked back at her. "You seem to find this amusing." Victoria folded her arms. "Because it is amusing. Honestly, Judge, I've been in real courtrooms, big ones, over serious matters. This is like community theater compared to what I'm used to." The air changed. Every person in the room felt it. Caprio leaned back, resting his elbows on the bench. "Community theater," he repeated softly. "Nothing personal," she added quickly, that hollow smile never wavering. "I just mean, let's keep perspective here. It's a ticket, not a trial." The gallery stared, some shaking their heads, others whispering furiously. Caprio remained quiet for several seconds, studying her with an intensity that made even the bailiff shift his weight. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, but edged with something harder. "Miss Hensley, I assure you, justice doesn't depend on the size of the courtroom. It depends on the size of the truth. And from what I'm hearing, yours seems rather small." A ripple of restrained laughter passed through the room. Victoria's smile faltered, just barely. Caprio flipped open the file again. "Now, why don't we discuss the threats you made to the other driver?" Her smirk returned, though thinner. "Oh, that. A misunderstanding. People exaggerate when they're scared. I simply told them that if they wanted to escalate this into a legal issue, they should be prepared for legal consequences. That's not a threat, it's advice." Advice. Interesting word choice. She flashed her teeth. "I'm good with words, Judge. Comes with the territory when you actually succeed in life." The gallery erupted into low murmurs again. The arrogance was suffocating. And yet Judge Caprio still hadn't raised his voice once. He simply nodded slowly, closing the file. "All right. I think I've heard enough for now." The calm in his tone made everyone else nervous. Judge Caprio folded his hands on the bench, his gaze settling on Victoria with quiet precision. "Miss Hensley, this report mentions you approached the occupants of the other vehicle directly after the incident. Would you care to explain what was said?" Victoria's smile didn't waver. "Of course, Your Honor. It was nothing dramatic, just a simple conversation that people are too sensitive to handle these days." "Go on," Caprio said softly. "Well," she continued, "they were overreacting, crying, panicking, claiming my driver almost killed them, which is ridiculous. I told them to calm down and be reasonable. And yes, I might have mentioned something like, 'Don't make this more expensive for yourselves.'" The gallery murmured. A man near the back whispered audibly, "She what?" Judge Caprio didn't move. "Expensive?" She shrugged, utterly unbothered. "You know how these things go, Judge. People get in minor fender situations, and suddenly they want to sue for emotional trauma. I was helping them avoid embarrassment. I was being practical." Her tone was smooth, too smooth. Caprio leaned back slightly. "You threatened them with financial consequences if they pursued legal action. Is that what you're telling me?" "Threatened? Oh, Judge, you make it sound so ugly. I advised them. I've been through this sort of thing before. I know how these situations spiral out of control." The words hung heavy. "Been through this before?" Caprio repeated. "Are you referring to the incident in 2019 involving your vehicle and a pedestrian?" The smile flickered. "That was a misunderstanding, and it was settled privately, as the records show."
"Privately," Caprio echoed. "Yes, the file mentions a settlement. A young boy, wasn't it?" Victoria's jaw tightened visibly. "It was years ago." Caprio's eyes never left hers. "And according to this report, the boy was 6 years old. You struck him with your car in a residential area. Is that correct?" She shifted her weight. "My driver was behind the wheel, and I made sure the family was compensated generously. That's what money is for, isn't it? Solving problems. A wave of shock rippled through the gallery. Someone muttered, "Unbelievable." Judge Caprio sat perfectly still, but his gaze hardened. He spoke slowly, deliberately. "Money doesn't solve problems, Ms. Hensley. It hides them temporarily." Victoria actually rolled her eyes, laughing under her breath. Oh, please. That family got more than they deserved. Their lawyer was practically begging to settle. If anything, I was generous. The gallery stirred louder now. A woman whispered, "She hit a kid." Caprio raised his hand. "Order." Silence fell instantly. He looked back at Victoria. "Do you realize what you just said?" "I realize," she said coolly, "that people take advantage of wealthy individuals every single day. I'm tired of being painted as a villain just because I'm successful." Caprio's voice remained even, but it carried new weight. "Success doesn't grant immunity, Miss Hensley. It carries responsibility, something you seem to have confused with privilege." Her smile returned, sharp and forced. "Judge, I've been sitting here 15 minutes listening to lectures. Can we wrap this up? I have real work to get back to, unlike most people here." The words landed like a slap. Gasps filled the courtroom again. Caprio stayed calm. Too calm. "Real work," he repeated softly. "And what exactly do you do, Miss Hensley?" "I run a real estate company," she said proudly. "We manage properties across the East Coast. Hundreds of families live under roofs that I provide. So forgive me if I don't have time to babysit city employees with traffic obsessions." The judge looked at her for a long moment, then exhaled slowly. "You employ people, Miss Hensley. That should have taught you something about empathy, because right now I'm struggling to find any in your words." Her smile turned smug. "Empathy doesn't pay bills, Judge. Discipline does." It was one of those moments when the air felt electric. Everyone sensed what was coming. Judge Caprio closed the file slowly. "Very well. You've made your point clear." He turned to the bailiff. "Please bring forward the witness statement from the other couple in the vehicle." As the officer moved, Victoria leaned back slightly, whispering just loud enough for the microphone to catch. "This is such a waste of my time." The gallery stirred immediately. Caprio's eyes flicked up, sharp, quiet, final. "No, Miss Hensley, not a waste. A reckoning." The courtroom door closed softly as the bailiff returned, handing Judge Caprio a thin folder. He flipped through the pages in silence, expression calm, but the tension radiating from the bench said everything. "Miss Hensley," he began slowly, "this statement from the other driver says that after your vehicle nearly collided with theirs, you approached their window and said, and I'm quoting here, 'If you say a word about this, I'll make sure you pay for it.' Do you deny saying that?" She laughed, not nervously, mockingly. "Honestly, I don't even remember my exact words. People love to exaggerate, especially when they realize who they're dealing with." Caprio's gaze didn't shift. "And who exactly were they dealing with, Miss Hensley?" She leaned back, brushing invisible lint from her sleeve. "Someone who actually matters in this city, unlike them or this ridiculous little hearing." Gasps rippled through the gallery again. Caprio removed his glasses and set them down deliberately. "Miss Hensley, I'd advise you to think very carefully about what you say next." Victoria smirked. "Oh, please, spare me the dramatics, Judge. I've dealt with bigger fish than you." The courtroom went completely still. Her driver's face drained of color. "Ma'am," he whispered urgently, shaking his head. She ignored him.
Let's not pretend this is some kind of supreme court, all right? You handle parking tickets and minor local violations. I pay more in taxes than half your city makes in a lifetime. I fund this place. I fund you." The words echoed like an explosion. Every eye in the room turned toward Judge Caprio, waiting. He didn't react immediately. He sat back, breathing slowly through his nose, expression unreadable, the calm before the storm. "Miss Hensley," he said softly, "do you think that money gives you the right to treat people as less than you?" She smiled sweetly. "No, not less, just different. Some of us are meant to lead, others follow. It's how the world works." That single line, cold and unapologetic, made the entire courtroom shift in their seats. A man near the back muttered loudly, "You've got to be kidding me." Caprio nodded slowly, eyes locked on her. "So let me make sure I understand. You believe your financial status puts you above the law." She shrugged lightly, tone dripping with mock innocence. "Not above it, Judge, just a little further away from it than most." The gallery stirred again, people shaking their heads, whispering in disbelief. Even Officer Nolan clenched his jaw, visibly restraining himself. Caprio, however, remained composed. When his voice came, it was calm but sharper than before, deliberate and cutting. "You know, Miss Hensley, I've spent over 30 years in this courtroom. I've seen every kind of person, the poor, the broken, the angry, the lost. And I've seen the rich, too. But rarely," he paused, leaning forward slightly, "I have seen someone so proud of being heartless."
The words struck like lightning. Victoria froze, her smirk faltering for the first time. "I understand arrogance," Caprio continued, "but what I see in you isn't arrogance. It's emptiness. Because when a person truly has power, they don't need to remind everyone of it." The gallery fell completely silent. Every word from the judge cut through the air like glass. Victoria's jaw tightened. "You're trying to humiliate me, aren't you?" Caprio shook his head slowly. "No, ma'am. You've done that yourself." The line hit like thunder. Even her driver looked down, covering his face. For a moment, Victoria didn't speak. Then she let out a dry laugh, though her voice trembled ever so slightly. "This is absurd. I came here for a ticket, not a therapy session. Can we be done now?" Judge Caprio nodded once. "We're getting there. But before we are, I want to address something clearly." He picked up the old report, the one involving the boy. "You say you've been through this before. You're right. But you didn't go through it. You bought your way out of it. And that's not justice. That's cowardice." The courtroom murmured louder. Victoria's eyes flashed with anger. "You have no idea what that situation was." Caprio's tone hardened. "I don't need to. I know how you handled it. The same way you handle everything else, with money and intimidation." She stood up abruptly. "You can't talk to me like that." Caprio looked up at her, calm but unshakable. "I just did." The audience gasped again, this time with a few quiet chuckles of disbelief. Her voice rose. "This whole thing is a joke. I could buy this courtroom if I wanted to." Caprio leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering to a quiet, deadly calm. "And yet, here you are, standing in it, powerless." The room went still. You could hear the faint hum of the lights overhead. For the first time since she walked in, Victoria didn't have an answer. Judge Caprio rested his hands on the bench, his calm voice carrying weight that made even the air feel heavy. "Miss Hensley, I wasn't planning to revisit your past today, but since you brought up how you handle things, I think we need to talk about the incident you mentioned, the one involving the young boy." Victoria shifted, her smirk returning, though her eyes flickered with something defensive. "That case is closed, Judge. Years ago. It has nothing to do with this."
Caprio nodded slowly. You're right. Legally, it's closed. But morally, he tilted his head, that's a different story. He glanced at the file, then looked back at her. According to this report, your car struck a 6-year-old boy named David Johnson on Elmhurst Avenue in 2019. You were a passenger. Your driver lost control. I already said that, she snapped, folding her arms. Yes, Caprio replied softly, but what you didn't mention is that your lawyers paid the family an off-the-record settlement. They didn't press charges because they were told the boy's medical expenses would be fully covered. She smirked faintly. Which they were, so what's the problem? The gallery murmured again, several people shaking their heads. The problem, Caprio said, his voice tightening slightly, is that the payment wasn't about helping them. It was about silencing them. The family was told if they spoke to the media, the settlement would be revoked. Her tone turned sharp. Objection! That's not in the official record. Caprio looked directly at her. No, it's not, because that part was handled through threats and intimidation. The investigator who took the original statement resigned 2 weeks later. The family moved to another state within the month. Convenient, don't you think? Her jaw clenched, her hand gripping the edge of the podium. You have no proof of that. I don't need proof, Caprio said quietly. I have a pattern. Her eyes widened slightly. He pressed on, tone calm, deliberate, merciless. I've seen this kind of behavior before. People who think money is a shield. They break the rules, buy forgiveness, and convince themselves it's fine because no one ever tells them no. He paused, leaning forward. Well, Miss Hensley, today someone's telling you no. The gallery was completely still. Not a whisper, not a breath. Victoria swallowed, trying to regain composure. This is absurd. I came here for a ticket, not a therapy session. Can we be done now? No, Caprio said firmly. You're here because you never learned what consequences feel like. Every time life tried to teach you, you paid your way out of it. But not this time. The words hit harder than any raised voice could have. For the first time, Victoria looked smaller. Her chin dipped slightly, the bravado cracking under genuine authority. Caprio sighed quietly and leaned back. You know, Miss Hensley, I often say the law is here to correct, not to destroy. But people like you make it very hard for justice to stay patient. Her voice dropped to a whisper. So what now? Caprio looked down at the file once more before answering. Now I decide how much of this lesson you'll carry with you after today.
The gallery remained silent. Every person could feel it. The shift. This wasn't about a ticket anymore. This was about a lifetime of arrogance finally meeting its reckoning. For a long moment, Judge Caprio said nothing. The courtroom was quiet enough to hear the faint buzz of fluorescent lights above. Everyone could feel it. That calm before the inevitable. Victoria shifted in her seat, clutching her purse tightly, face pale now, though her mouth still twisted into a smirk she was struggling desperately to maintain. Finally, Judge Caprio exhaled and spoke softly. You know, Miss Hensley, I've been on this bench for decades. I've met every kind of person you can imagine. The angry, the poor, the broken, the arrogant. But you're something else entirely. She tilted her chin upward, forcing a smile. I'll take that as a compliment. It's not, Caprio said, his tone sharp but controlled. The room stilled again. He continued, voice steady but cutting through the silence like a blade. You see, most people who stand here are scared, not because of the fine or the ticket, but because they know they've done something wrong. They feel guilt, regret, a conscience. He leaned forward, eyes fixed on her. But you wear your mistakes like jewelry, proud to show them off, certain that money and status make you untouchable. The smirk vanished completely. Caprio's voice lowered, and the weight in it made everyone sit up straighter. You threatened a young couple,
after almost running them off the road. You bragged about buying silence from a family whose son you hurt. And now you stand here laughing, as if this courtroom, these people, and the law itself are beneath you." Her driver's hands fidgeted nervously. He looked like he wanted to disappear. Caprio pointed subtly toward him. "This man beside you, your driver, had more decency in one moment of honesty than you've shown in your entire testimony. He took responsibility immediately. He apologized. You mocked him for it." Victoria's jaw tightened. "I didn't mock him. I didn't—" Caprio cut her off with a single raised hand. "Enough." The silence that followed was absolute. He took a deep breath, then continued, tone softer but full of quiet power. "You know, Miss Hensley, I've been on this bench for decades. I've met every kind of person you can imagine. The angry, the poor, the broken, the arrogant. But you're something else entirely." She tilted her chin upward, forcing a smile. "I'll take that as a compliment." "It's not," Caprio said, his tone sharp but controlled. The room stilled again. He continued, voice steady but cutting through the silence like a blade. "You see, most people who stand here are scared, not because of the fine or the ticket, but because they know they've done something wrong. They feel guilt, regret, a conscience." He leaned forward, eyes fixed on her. "But you wear your mistakes like jewelry, proud to show them off, certain that money and status make you untouchable." The smirk vanished completely. Caprio's voice lowered, and the weight in it made everyone sit up straighter. "You threatened a young couple after almost running them off the road. You bragged about buying silence from a family whose son you hurt. And now you stand here laughing, as if this courtroom, these people, and the law itself are beneath you." Her driver's hands fidgeted nervously. He looked like he wanted to disappear. Caprio pointed subtly toward him. "This man beside you, your driver, had more decency in one moment of honesty than you've shown in your entire testimony. He took responsibility immediately. He apologized. You mocked him for it." Victoria's jaw tightened. "I didn't mock him. I didn't—" Caprio cut her off with a single raised hand. "Enough." The silence that followed was absolute. He took a deep breath, then continued, tone softer but full of quiet power. "I was raised to believe that wealth and status don't define a person. Character does. You can have a mansion, a fleet of cars, a bank full of money, but if you've lost your empathy, you've lost everything." Her eyes flickered. For the first time she looked uncertain, small almost. "Miss Hensley," Caprio said, leaning forward slightly, "I don't envy you. I pity you. Because somewhere along the way, you started believing that kindness is weakness, that humility is for the poor. But let me tell you something. Humility is what keeps a soul alive. Arrogance eats you from the inside." The gallery was dead silent. Even the bailiff, a man who'd seen hundreds of hearings, stood motionless, eyes locked on the judge. Caprio paused, then added softly, "You could have taken responsibility today. You could have apologized to those people you threatened. You could have proven that all that money didn't erase your humanity. But you didn't. Instead, you mocked, laughed, and reminded everyone just how far you've drifted from what decency looks like." Victoria looked down, eyes darting across the desk, searching for a defense she no longer had. The judge's voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. "I can't give that boy back his childhood. I can't take away the fear you left in that couple. But I can do this. I can make sure for once in your life, your actions have a consequence you can't buy your way out of." Then he went quiet, completely quiet. 5 seconds passed, then 10. The silence stretched impossibly long. 15 seconds, not a single person moved. No one coughed, no one shifted. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Victoria's eyes darted around nervously. Her confidence crumbled under the weight of that silence. The entire courtroom felt it. Something was coming. something final. Then Judge Caprio spoke. One line, low, precise, devastating. Money buys comfort, not character, and never immunity from consequence here. The courtroom erupted. Gasps, whispers, a few quiet exclamations. Victoria's face went white. Her mouth opened, but no words came. The line hung in the air like a verdict carved in stone. After a moment, scattered applause began, not loud, but steady, respectful. A teacher near the middle row nodded slowly. "That's what our kids need to hear," she murmured to the person beside her. An older veteran in the front row leaned forward slightly. "Finally, someone said it. Money doesn't make you better, it just shows who you really are." A young mother holding her teenager's hand whispered, "I hope my daughter remembers this. That's real accountability." Judge Caprio let the moment settle, then continued, tone firm and clear. "Miss Hensley, here is the court's ruling. You will pay the full citation issued to your driver. You will also pay full damages to the couple involved in this near collision. Additionally, you will make a $10,000 contribution to Providence Children's Hospital." The gallery murmured approvingly. Victoria sat frozen. "But that's not all," Caprio continued. "You will complete a mandatory 8-hour in-person defensive driving course within 30 days. You will also perform 30 hours of community service with a teen traffic safety program, so perhaps you can teach young people what you failed to learn yourself." Her eyes widened. Victoria opened her mouth to protest, but Caprio wasn't finished. "Furthermore, you will write a formal letter of acknowledgement to the couple you threatened. That letter will be filed with this court. And all of these requirements must be completed within 60 days, or your driver's license will be suspended." He paused, letting the weight of the sanctions sink in. The courtroom was quiet again, but this time it was the silence of collective satisfaction. "Miss Hensley," Caprio said quietly, "you told this court earlier that you fund this city with your taxes. Let me tell you something. This city doesn't need your money. It needs your decency."
The line drew quiet applause from the gallery, soft but steady. Victoria lowered her gaze, silent. For once, she didn't roll her eyes or argue. Judge Caprio picked up his gavel. "Case concluded," he said firmly. Crack! The sound echoed through the courtroom. Final. Unshakable. As she stood to leave, her driver looked at her nervously. "Thank you, Your Honor," he said quietly. Caprio nodded to him, then looked back at Victoria. "And Miss Hensley," he said gently, "when you walk out that door, think about what you almost lost today. Not your money, but your humanity." She nodded faintly, voice barely audible. "Yes, Your Honor." As she walked toward the exit, the gallery parted. The woman who had walked in with her head high and her arrogance higher now kept her eyes on the ground. The sound of her heels clicked like a slow, reluctant march toward humility. When the door closed behind her, the room exhaled as one. The door shut softly behind Victoria Hensley. For the first time since the hearing began, the courtroom felt calm again. The tension that had filled the air from the moment she walked in vanished, replaced by quiet reflection. Judge Caprio leaned back slightly, letting out a slow breath. The file still lay open before him, but he didn't glance at it again. He didn't need to. The real verdict had already been handed down, not just by the law, but by conscience. He looked toward Officer Nolan and nodded. "Good work, officer. You handled yourself with professionalism and restraint. I wish more people respected what that uniform stands for." "Thank you, Your Honor," Nolan replied quietly. Then Caprio turned to the gallery, a room full of ordinary citizens who had just witnessed something extraordinary. His tone softened, calm but filled with meaning. "You know,
Sometimes people walk into this courtroom thinking justice is a game. They think money, status, or connections can bend it in their favor. But justice has a funny way of humbling those who underestimate it. The gallery nodded in agreement. He went on, voice lowering slightly. What we saw today wasn't about a ticket. It was about the danger of believing you're untouchable. The law doesn't care who you are. It cares what you do, and it always will. There was a brief silence, one of those rare, powerful pauses that said more than words. Finally, Caprio gave a small, almost weary smile. All right, folks, let's move on. Next case. The clerk called out the next name, and the ordinary rhythm of the courtroom resumed. But the story of that case would be remembered by everyone there, because on that day, arrogance had walked in laughing and left in silence. Now let me ask you this. Do you think Judge Caprio went too easy on her? Or should people who use money to escape consequences face even harsher penalties? And here's another question. If you were in Judge Caprio's place, what would you have done differently? Drop your answers in the comments below. I'd love to know what you think. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like this video, subscribe to Order in the Court, and hit that bell icon so you never miss another powerful moment from Judge Caprio's courtroom. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that no one is above the law. Your next story is already waiting. I'll see you soon with another case, if you subscribe to this channel. Please, this is a dramatization for storytelling and education, not legal advice or reporting.